Right, Honorable, yes, that's true. The official dome process can take place. But if you can't have leaders extend an olive branch to each other, break bread, make peace, and convene in one place. We've not had the East African Leaders Summit in the last 1 or 2 years. How are we going to make steps towards the federation?
I may ask you to check your facts, correct? Because the summit that appointed me, it happened on 27th of February this year. So the summit has been happening. And I think it's also again in their interest to critically be meeting so that they focus on now.
In 2020, the summit wasn't.
Yeah, of course, 2020, it came up with their own issues of pandemic. We are even struggling on how to start these virtual meetings and stuff like that. So really we cannot, simply because they skipped meeting in 1 year, 2020, for obvious reasons, we cannot say that the summit has not been meeting. Summit has been meeting, and I know they are keen to be meeting. There is that political goodwill. And we have a calendar of their meetings at the Secretariat. And it's our duty again to make sure that we generate enough agenda so that the summit can meet and consider some of those agenda items. The Council of Ministers that precedes the summit has been meeting. Last week there was an extraordinary, for example, Council of Ministers that met, and it was my first one to really facilitate. And you could see the goodwill that is coming out and the expectations that indeed we need to move now at possibly higher speed so that we can realize some of these things that are very important to the community.
As we speak, the coffers of the East African community are fairly empty, partly because member countries are not contributing. South Sudan and Burundi have, been given notice that they should contribute. And the EU, which was very keen about this regional bloc and gave support, is also facing financial constraints. The COVID pandemic has burrowed across Europe and affected their economies. What is the way out of this problem?
I tell you, apparently for the last couple of weeks, months, the partner states you have just mentioned have remitted their resources, partially their resources to the community. That shows you their commitment to that. The Republic of Burundi and Republic of South Sudan, remitting some of the resources, some of the obligations to that. That shows you this commitment, it is there. But importantly, our going round, which is important, we're also demonstrating the value of the EAC Secretariat more now going forward. And with that demonstration, as we try to remind and engage with partner states to ensure that, of course, they meet part of their bargain, and that is now paying their subscription. And I see that happening with the political goodwill that is coming along now. I think they'll be paying. But most importantly, as a secretariat, we are developing a sustainable financing mechanism for the community so that we don't get into situations where we have lack of finances. For example, we could use models like the one used at the African Union, where part of the resources out of the community is contributed using a methodology of, for example, let's say a country's income or maybe a particular sector and so forth. And that way we are going to have a very sustainable way of generating finances and resources for the community. So I see a lot of optimism when you come to this. And we will not, again, developing an agenda that is bankable, that is fundable. Some of the things that we are saying, decisions of the summit, including the inclusion of DRC and so forth, that will require resources. And that's why we are indeed going round. And one of the duties of a Secretary General is to mobilize resources. And by going round, that's what I'm basically doing my work to exactly mobilize resources.
The other concern is in regard to the question of intra-regional trade, which for the 2000 till 2018, it had grown by leaps and bounds and has since stunted. And some of the challenges is one, the non-tariff barriers, the protectionist policies. Uganda's milk can't go to Kenya, the chicken can't go, and then Uganda also engages in a kind of trade war. In fact, the business community in Uganda at one time was planning to file a suit at the East African Court of Justice. How do you manage to solve this problem?
You know, again, one of my the main objective of my service to the community is to have increased intra-EAC trade, increase from where it is. Currently, below 20%. And we are saying it is possible, if we have all the mechanisms put in place, to have the intra-EAC trade even get to 50%, like other regional blocks, like in Europe, it's about 70%. Asia is above 60%. So it is possible if we indeed do what you exactly say, resolving non-tariff barriers. And by the way, going around our border points as EAC Secretariat, one of the issues is to understand some of the barriers that are being created or could be administratively happening at the border points and make sure that we resolve. Secondly, creating some mechanisms like the remedial trade disputes mechanism, and that is something we intend to fast track to make sure that there are some disputes mechanisms in place to resolve some of the trade disputes, which will unlock the ease of doing business, but also will facilitate and enable movement of goods and services from one country to another. And that is again in our interest to make sure that those mechanisms are in place. Thirdly, by going to the border points, we are instituting a system where we can monitor and scan the progress of movement of goods along the border points. And after every 3 months, we'll be reviewing to see how the trend is happening. If it is increasing, we are happy. If it's stagnant or dropping, we must establish why and we'll be able to resolve. Like now we intend to have a special hotline number at the Secretariat that can be used by those who are doing cross-border businesses. Ensure that you are getting feedback in terms of what is happening. And that is a participatory approach that will allow stakeholders, businesses, persons who are using the border points to report on a regular basis in case there are issues. So the issues is continuously engaging. But fourth, which is very important, is a strong engagement between the private sector and the public sector. That is public-private sector dialogue. And that has to be constantly happening so that whenever issues arise, we're able to engage and resolve where possible. So constant engagement is key, is a very important strategy. We have seen it work, and going forward, this will be a very important model. And that is why in our missions, wherever we go as East African community, we shall also be going along with the private sector. That informs why in our missions going to partner states, we have also been meeting the private sector.